What should you do if your dog's baseline stress levels are too high? I specialize in working with dogs who are dysregulated, and these dogs have baseline stress levels that are too high. Okay, imagine our stress scale: green, yellow, orange, red. In the green zone, we see healthy levels of stress. The learner knows that they are safe. Their nervous system knows that they are safe. We're seeing engagement of the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. Systems like the immune system and the digestive system are working at full capacity. The thinking brain is fully online and working efficiently, so our learner can process information well. They can remember well. They're curious. They problem solve. They can engage in play. In the red zone, the opposite is true. The learner believes that they are unsafe. Their sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, is taking all of those resources. And in that survival mode, you don't need to eat pizza or do math problems or make friends. You need to be fast. You need to be strong. So instead of resources going, say, to the immune system and the digestive system, they're going to the cardiovascular system. They're going to the respiratory system. Our learner isn't processing information well here. And this is totally normal and healthy and adaptive if the learner is actually unsafe. But when dogs are experiencing that level of stress on a regular basis, it's not only damaging to their behavioral health and their emotional health and their mental health, but it's also damaging to their physical health. Now, as you go up the stress scale, this shift happens from totally in the thinking brain, let's say, to totally in the survival brain. So imagine in the yellow zone that 80% of the body's resources are going to the thinking brain, that parasympathetic nervous system, and 20% of the resources are going to that survival brain, the limbic system. So the thinking brain still has the majority of the resources, and it's trying really hard to get back to green. And so this is a stage with a lot of attempts to cope. Now, whether or not the learner has skills, coping skills that will actually serve them in coming back down is a totally different matter. And whether or not they are able to navigate the environment in a way that will allow their stress levels to come back down is also another matter. But this is the stage of trying to cope with stress. It's normal to come up into this space, and sometimes you can even get there through positive emotions in this yellow zone, but it's not great to live there. And further up in the orange zone, imagine those numbers flipped. 80% of resources going to that survival brain, only 20% to the thinking brain. Now the majority hold has shifted, and the learner is no longer trying to cope and come back down to green. They're gearing up for that survival response. Their body is adrenalized. We see external physiological stress responses like dilated pupils and excessive shedding or dander, panting from an elevated heart rate, or tight, tense muscles. So in an ideal situation, the environment actually is safe and the learner knows that they are safe and their baseline in that green zone. But dogs who are dysregulated baseline in that yellow or even orange zone. So the jump from where they are to the red zone is much smaller. And they're feeling the effects of chronic stress. It shows up in their behavior as a symptom, and it also shows up in their physical health, and it shows up in their mental and emotional health. And so if you have a dog who is dysregulated, they're living in those higher levels of stress, and you start doing behavior modification work without addressing those too high stress levels, your work is not going to be as efficient as you want it to be, because your dog is dedicating too many resources to just trying to cope with stress. It is exhausting to be chronically stressed. Your learner isn't going to be able to learn as well or to remember as well. They're not going to be able to engage in curiosity or problem solving. We're going to have a hard time building resilience to stress in that space, or even teaching coping skills effectively. And so to really make the most of our work and to really prioritize the dog's well-being, we want to get to the root issue and figure out how to lower those baseline stress levels. And this is the topic of the entire first 90-minute webinar of our Behavior Bites webinar trio that launches September 13th. So on the 13th, we'll spend 90 minutes diving into just this topic. It's the first of 3 webinars diving into the 3 main goals of behavior therapy: this holistic stress reduction, building self-regulatory skills, and building resilience to stress. The short version of what that looks like, though, I'll share here. It's really common for us humans to first notice the behavior concerns that cause us the most distress. And so that might be aggressive behavior. It might be behavior that triggers us and makes us feel unsafe, or makes us feel as though our dog is in an unsafe situation. Or it might be the spaces where our dog's behavior is most easily to us recognizable as extreme distress. And so it's normal for us to hone in on those things and for those to be our presenting problems when someone starts behavior therapy. But a good behavior consultant will help you look beyond that to identify other areas where your dog might be experiencing stress that aren't even on our human radar. It's really normal to be super focused on behaviors that are stressful. And so things that are stressful for our dogs that don't get our attention may be missed. This is a non-inclusive list of some of the common places I find stress. In reactions to sights or sounds from inside the house to sights and sounds outside of the house, or from the yard, balcony, patio, car rides, noise sensitivities or phobias, separation-related distress or hyperattachment, triggers on walks, pain or other physical health conditions in the body, inadequate sleep, either in terms of quantity, quality, or both, a lack of safe places from the dog's perspective, conflict within the relationship, a lack of full safety in the relationship with other pets in the home or people, stress around visitors, vet visits, grooming, frustration or hyperarousal around food, fear around movements or sounds within the house. Even things like daycare or fetch can actually be stressors having a negative impact on the dog's life. So first, we want to identify all of the different places that our dog might be going up that stress scale. And sometimes this can be tricky to identify because the dog's behavior might seem to us like overexcitement, or we might otherwise misinterpret what we're seeing and not understand that regardless of the emotion the dog started with, the level of arousal, the level of stress that they are hitting has taken them past the point where they're having fun or feeling good. And so we want to put management around these stressors. We want to give the dog a stress vacation. We want to make sure they're having adequate relaxation and restorative time, sleep. We also want to look at this from an enrichment perspective. And so I already mentioned some of these pieces. We're looking at sleep. We're looking at physical health conditions. We want to make sure that the enrichment activities we're giving our dog are actually serving them rather than making things worse. So we need to check, is that daycare actually doing what we want it to do? Is fetch actually doing what we want it to do? We want to make sure that we are providing a lot of opportunities for species typical behaviors and a lot of opportunities for these dysregulated dogs for calming enrichment, activities that are going to help them lower their arousal level. And we want to make sure that these activities are, the challenge is appropriately matched to the skill level and the arousal level so the dog can be successful. There are a lot of ways that we might label the dog's particular brand of dysregulation. So often we will see veterinarians diagnose these dogs with anxiety disorders or trauma disorders or other conditions in which we're saying the nervous system is just set higher than we would expect it to be. We can also see this happen through chronic stress. So if the dog experiences chronic stress, we can actually see a baseline reset that used to be green up higher on the scale. And so these dogs often need behavior medication in addition to behavior therapy. The goals of behavior medication are actually well in line with the goals of behavior therapy, and behavior medication should be considered a first line of defense, not a last resort. Behavior medication should help reduce baseline stress levels in dogs who are dysregulated. It should help to increase resilience to stress, and it should help the dogs access their self-regulatory skills more easily. I'm super excited for our first webinar of the trio where we'll get to dive into this even more in depth. This is a live 90-minute webinar and we will have question and answer at the end. Recordings are also available if you can't join us live. Hope to see you there.